it was presented in a way where, look at these massive pet food companies. They've done so much work. They've done so much research. You don't need to question them. Like, they've already laid the groundwork. There's nothing new to be learned here. There's nothing to look at. And so that kind of set the tone. And it was like, all of a sudden, everybody started behaving as if dog food had always been with us and was always a thing. And we forgot that a mere 50, 60 years ago, everybody fed their dogs table scraps.
Welcome back to another episode of the Crunchy Carnivore Podcast. I am Melissa Weidenhammer, natural rearing breeder and certified canine nutritionist, and I am here with my partner in crime, holistic veterinarian, Dr. Jessica Levy. What are we going to be talking about today, Dr. Jessica?
Today we're going to talk about dog food, the history of dog food, how it came into use, and what veterinarians are taught about feeding dogs in vet school.
Yeah, so last time, our previous episode, this is kind of a second part to a two-parter. The first part was cracks in the foundation of the dog world from the perspective and the side of education and medicine and kind of how we got to where we got in that arena. But today, the second crack of the foundation that we feel like is just as imperative to talk about is the lack of understanding and misinformation and misdirection when it comes to the diet of dogs and cats from the conventional world. This is a massive problem. This is where I think both of us would agree. Majority of problems that we see in animals could be alleviated if they just got the diet correct. And so, if we believe that feeding fresh raw food is so correct in the way they're supposed to eat, why there's so much opposition and fight from the conventional side of things in this particular topic. Where would you start with that?
Right, because this is kind of the most important thing that you can do for your dog. So for people who don't want to take the step to go to a holistic vet or don't want to jump in and buy supplements, changing your dog's diet is like the first foundational step anyway. And so you might as well dive into that and see how far it gets you, because it will solve a lot of problems. Dog food, as we know it, was first invented in the 1800s. It was called Spratt's dog cakes or something like that.
Biscuits, I think.
Yeah.
Dog biscuits.
And it was basically blood and some bone meal something, or
I think some flour and it was like 3 or 4 ingredients.
It was pretty simple, but dogs would eat it because it had blood in it. And so it was kind of considered, well, here's an easier way, just buy these dog cakes and you can feed them to your dog and you don't have to find scraps to feed the dog.
Was it considered a whole food, like a whole diet? Or I thought they were just like treats.
I think it was a dog food.
Oh my goodness.
I think that was the idea. Wow. At least that's kind of what it looks like from the ads when you look at them.
I have to go back and look at the ads.
And so, and then because at that time people knew that dogs were carnivores, and so people mainly fed their dogs table scraps or hunting leftovers or whatever. And then after World War I was fought with a lot of cavalry horses, and so they had no use for them after World War I. And so they were turned into canned dog food. And so that was where the canned food industry first started, was with the horses that were left over from World War I. At some point in World War II, the metal for the cans became kind of unavailable because metal was so valuable that it was being used to build tanks and guns and ships and things like that. And so if people still wanted the convenience of a pre-prepared food, which of course they did, so they had to kind of get away from canning. And that was when, in the 50s, Purina developed the first kibble type of diet, like the extruded diet. And so in the pet food manufacturing process, the extruder, I always think of it as the pasta machine part of the process. Like, it's the part that makes the pieces. And so Purina developed that in the 1950s. And then their product gained in popularity until in the 1960s, and certainly into the 70s, more and more people were feeding their dogs pre-prepared dry dog food or similar products. I remember the first dog that we had when I was a kid in the 1960s, and we fed that dog Gainsburgers, which was, again, it was some sort of, like, similar to fresh pet nowadays.
It's like a semi-moist patty type.
That was probably made of some super disgusting ingredients, but we didn't know any better because it was the 60s. And so that's basically, from there, that industry ballooned, and now it's, in the tens of billions, if not more, per year, because everybody will buy some sort of pre-prepared dog food. Yeah, so let's talk about nutritional education for veterinarians, I think, is the next step.
So the question then is, this very recently, I mean, it really is only about 65 years ago that dry food in a bag started becoming the norm. I feel like when you and I have talked about it too, in the 80s, there was the advent of television commercials, which was a huge boost for that, that made it just seem more, that's just what you did. It kind of made it seem more like there was no other better way to feed your dog than these amazing ththings seen in commercials. And so then we also have to now look at nutrition education from, the veterinarian standpoint, because who do we go to for advice? Who do we go to teach us, what we're supposed to do? So you obviously have firsthand experience with the level of nutrition and what the nutrition education is in veterinary schools. So what is being taught to veterinarians?
And the answer is sometimes very little. So it depends on the school. In some schools, nutrition is an elective. And so maybe if your vet was thinking all along about going to small animal private practice, then they might have chosen to take a nutrition class. I went to school so long ago that we did have a year-long nutrition class. Most of it was about feeding the lactating dairy cow. Because that is big business, right? That's where our food comes from. We did have a couple of lectures about dog and cat nutrition, courtesy of a vet from Science Diet. And Science Diet wrote the book, Small Animal Clinical Nutrition, that every vet student is given for free. And that kind of the education was not about the ingredients. It really focused on how to do the math so that you could calculate your pet's metabolizable energy and therefore figure out how many kilocalories per day you were supposed to be feeding them. That's really what it was about. It was presented in a way where, look at these massive pet food companies. They've done so much work. They've done so much research. You don't need to question them. Like, they've already laid the groundwork. There's nothing new to be learned here. There's nothing to look at. And so that kind of set the tone. And it was like, all of a sudden, everybody started behaving as if dog food had always been with us and was always a thing. And we forgot that a mere 50, 60 years ago, everybody fed their dogs table scraps. So that was kind of how that education / indoctrination happened. Also, vet students are, I don't know if they still are, but we were given food for free or crazy dirt cheap from Purina, Science Diet, and IAMS. And so that was what we all fed our pets. Literally every single person in my class who had a pet, that's what we fed them. And then every lecture at every conference is going to be paid for by either a drug manufacturer, one of the large pet food companies, and so they essentially financially support all of veterinary education, even past vet school. So then in the, you could say, like, okay, but then why are veterinarians so opposed to raw feeding, right? I mean, even your human doctor will tell you that maybe you should eat some fresh food and, not eat potato chips all the time.
Right.
And yet veterinarians seem kind of violently opposed to this. And what happened was that in 2013, the American Veterinary Medical Association passed a white paper. They passed a resolution against feeding raw diets to dogs and cats because it was deemed a public health hazard. And so now every veterinarian was immediately imbued with the knowledge that if you touch raw pet food, you are exposing yourself to Salmonella and E. coli, and you will get sick and die. And your pet might too.
So
but really it's about you.
I mean, at this point, like, we've already got a few things going on here where, I mean, you have big pet food being a huge part of veterinary education, huge part, whether it's in the schools or at seminars and conferences. They're getting in the door immediately, giving out free things. There's something psychological probably that happens when you're given free stuff.
There's a great competition at my school for who is going to be the student science diet rep.
Oh, wow. So you've got all of that already.
Because then you already feel like you're winning a prize.
And then now you've got in the mid 2000s, they've just doubled down on why raw food is the devil.
Right. And so the reason that it's important that it was perceived to be a public health hazard is because at no point did anybody say, what should a dog eat? What do dogs eat in the wild when there are no people around? What do cats naturally eat? That was not at all part of the equation. That was not discussed. That was not brought up. Nobody was interested in that.
Which is so interesting to me because that is, I mean, biology is science. it just doesn't even.
Right, and then the flip side is here we're supposed to be guiding people to tell them how to keep their dogs and cats healthy or how to get them healthy if they're not, without being able to say a word about their natural diet and what they might actually eat on their own. So yeah, it just can't be mentioned.
Well, and then, as you and I were talking too, so it's like you and I have done this for such a long time. And like when I got into raw feeding was already a thing. Like there was raw food being made, in different capacities. And so I had only ever seen raw dog food as raw dog food. And that's just what I think of when I think about feeding dog or cat a raw diet. But you gave a very interesting perspective that I never would have thought of, where that's not what veterinarians think of. Conventional veterinarians do not think of a, ethically sourced and produced, raw food that's been, with human grade ingredients, pristinely packaged, prepared, frozen, all the things. So many things have been taken into account. That's not what they think of when they think about feeding a dog raw. So I think what is important for us to touch on, because then we also have to go back to the extruded kibble conversation, because they are thinking that it is what goes into extruded kibble. I can't say that word. That is what is going to be fed raw. So let's talk about the reality of, let's talk about it, because this is a big deal. And if anybody has heard either of us talk before, we always talk about pet food. There's a reason we talk about it. They show you exactly what we're about to talk about. So I will reference it in the description again. It's probably going to be in half of our podcast descriptions. But anyway, what goes in to kibble, and thereby our veterinarians thinking is going to be fed raw to a dog?
And I don't even know if they're even really thinking about it, or if it's just shows how amazing and easy indoctrination is.
Sure.
So I was looking at a pet food yesterday when I have clients come in who are not, even if they are feeding raw, but I always look at the ingredient list because you find interesting things there. And so the first ingredient of whatever this food was chicken. The second ingredient was whole grain corn. And the third ingredient was something like whole grain sorghum, and then brown rice. And the thing is, all those things somehow sound so nutritious. Whole grain corn, right? We want things that are whole. Aren't they better if they're whole? Aren't we supposed to be eating a whole food diet?
Right.
And so whole grain corn just sounds like what you should eat. And I mean, we eat corn. Right, okay, so there's sweet corn that is grown for humans. And if it's not pretty enough to be sold on the cob, it can be turned into any kind of product. You can buy canned corn, creamed corn, and if it's not good enough for that, it can be turned into cornstarch, corn gluten, corn flour, blah, 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 all the things you can make out of corn. And if it's the corn that is not manufactured for humans is called feed corn. That's what's going to get fed to livestock and eventually dogs and cats. So already the corn in the diet is coming down from the livestock feed line of what happens to grains and other crops that are grown. And so if you think like, what kind of corn is not good enough to be fed to livestock? What kind of corn is not good enough to go into that bag of chicken scratch? Well, it's corn that is maybe old, moldy, has had some contaminant spilled on it, fell on the grain processing plant floor too many times. That is what is going to end up in pet food. And so things are just not what they seem. And that's one of the roles that AAFCO plays, which is what we've talked about before, is that AAFCO determines that this product over here, whatever it might be, on the pet food label, we can call it whole grain corn. And so it is a way of kind of making things a little bit rosier than they actually are. And so it's the thing that is worth remembering is that anything on a pet food label is not what it seems. Even things like brown rice, right? In the 70s, we were always taught that the white rice was bad and that whole foods and brown foods were better. And aren't you supposed to eat the brown rice? And that's like the one that's better for you, not the white rice from the, when you get Chinese takeout. And so if the rice is good enough quality, if the grains of rice are uniform, the same length, the same color, they're fresh, that is going to be packaged up for humans. If you can't package it up for humans, it can be made into rice milk, rice bran, rice flour, chicken and rice soup, etc., all the other things you can make out of rice. Not good enough for that, livestock. Not good enough for livestock, dogs and cats. And so I don't even know if in vet school we were particularly educated about kind of the food chain and how it works and where pet food comes from. I don't think we were taught that at all. Whenever it says any kind of oil in the ingredient list of a pet food, like sunflower oil, canola oil, safflower oil, in my mind, I pictured somebody in a white lab coat opening bottles of oil from the grocery store and pouring them into the pet food. That is not what is happening. So any oil on the ingredient list of pet food is used oil from the restaurant industry. That is legally the only way that they can dispose of their fryer oil. And so the way I found this out is, honestly, I sat down one day, I got a couple of brands of, like maybe 5 bags of dry dog food, and I sat and I Googled every single ingredient to find out what they were and where they came from. So there's that. But I think too, when most veterinarians hear raw meat, they're thinking of the roadkill by the side of the road that is gross and has flies on it, and why would you feed that to your dog? But like, that's kind of what's going on in their mind, oddly enough, while they go to the grocery store and buy meat for themselves. That's not what they're picturing in their heads when they're thinking dog food.
So then if they're not really taught this in vet school, you're not really taught where the ingredients that go into a bag of dog food come from, where does that concept, that thought come from?
What do you mean?
Just thinking that it's going to be these, kind of putrid, rotten pieces of meat is what you're feeding to your dog.
I have no idea why people think that, but I feel like they do. And people ask me all the time, well, are there parasites in raw meat? This is coming from the American factory farm system. We have the USDA. We have the Food Safety Inspection Service. There are people making sure that the slaughterhouses are clean and that the appropriate things are kept and that grody things don't end up in our food system. I think our food supply is fairly safe. And so ideally, that's where the products that we are feeding our dogs are going to come from. And it's less a matter of, pull over, there's a raccoon by the side of the road, let me grab that for the dogs. That's not what we're referring to. And again, also, living in America gives us an advantage in that we have fresh, good quality meat that we can buy for our dogs, whether it's made into raw pet food or we're buying it at the grocery store or from another supplier, versus some scene out of Indiana Jones in some third world country,
right,
where you're walking through an outdoor market and there are carcasses hanging up in the sun with flies on them.
Well, and the biggest argument that I think I've heard when I've heard vets oppose it, and this is, of course, a vet being interviewed on social media or something like that, but this is recent where, they will swear up and down it's the E. coli, it's the salmonella, it's the bacteria, it is completely unsafe. And I think to myself, first of all, if you actually look at a dog and how they're biologically built, or cats, they're meant to actually benefit from those bacteria in the acidity of their gut, first of all. But second of all, so they act as if nobody handles raw meat ever all the time in their kitchen to make food for their families. And so I don't understand where this fear gets pushed about that it's as if we've never encountered these. We don't encounter these things on a daily basis. If you eat meat in your house, like you feed ground beef to your family or chicken, you're going to encounter these things. It's not like we're idiots, right? I just don't.
Right. And so if you buy raw frozen pet food anywhere, like a pre-manufactured raw pet food, it is guaranteed to not have any bacteria in it. The FDA is super hardcore about raw pet food. They will not let them get away with any bacterial contamination. Most of the time, if you see recalls of raw pet food, it's a voluntary recall. And so I don't think there's ever actually been a proven case of a human being poisoned by bacteria from raw pet food. There have been a couple of cases where people claim that this is what happened, but when you look into the backstory, you always find out that there's not a clear connection there. So that's part of it. And then the other part is that our dogs and cats are not designed to eat a sterile diet. And so to some extent, that can sometimes cause problems where the grocery store has an advantage because the grocery store doesn't have to sell you sterile meat. The grocery store is allowed to have some bacteria in their meat because you, the human, are supposed to be taking it home and cooking it.
So when you decide to raw feed your dog or cat, just know this, you have options. You're going to be able to find plenty of commercially made raw food that if it is, prepackaged, a lot of times, and especially if it's sold in a store, it has to have gone through some sort of processing to have no bacteria, in it. HPP or high pressure pasteurization is a very common term, a very common process that is used. A much more preferred option would be fermentation because that takes care of it while also enhancing the bioavailability of the food. That's the commercially made prepackaged, but also know that there are a lot of raw food manufacturers, especially, your online sources, things like that. It is completely raw. It has all of the original bacteria and things like that in it. It's been frozen, but these again are beneficial bacteria. This is not dangerous to your animals. And so I think what's important to realize is, you have to kind of go to the root and understand the truth of the matter, what are dogs and cats meant to eat, what raw diet actually is and means, and a lot of these kind of fear-mongering techniques against raw food start to dissolve very quickly because you start to realize, oh, wait a minute, there's a lot of misconceptions from the conventional world about, what dogs should eat and cats, what's safe, what's not, what's appropriate, all of those types of things. So you've got it from, foundationally and educational standpoint where they've been told dogs should only eat dry food out of a bag. That's what's best for them, maybe out of a can. You've got the report basically saying that raw food is completely unsafe for animals and for people. You should never do it. And then, now we have kind of we're kind of stuck in this juxtaposition where it's like, you have to do your own research and you have to figure out where you land and what you believe based on facts.
Big part of the reason why we're doing these podcasts is because it's easier than you think or than you may have been led to believe to feed a raw diet, to keep your dogs healthy, to restore their health if possible. But no, it's not rocket science, and you don't have to look at your schedule and your kids and your husbands and wives and your other pets and think, but when do I have the time to do a ton of research? Like, what does that even mean? We've done it for you. And so, you obviously do your research if you have time and if you enjoy reading and watching videos and stuff like that. But raw feeding is much simpler than you have been led to believe. And you just have to remember that every book that's published reflects an opinion. Everybody online is a critic. and an expert. And so you have to kind of take everything with a grain of salt. But like part of what we're here to do with this series is make it easy for you, because it is easy, or easier than it has been presented as.
Yep. So just know that you know, when you get the opposition from the conventional world against raw feeding, there are good reasons in their eyes why they're opposing it, but when you zoom out, the science actually argues with that, and actually is very much, it's very obvious that dogs should eat fresh food, cats should eat fresh food. It's not really, I don't even know how it's even up for debate. I really don't.
Yeah. When I talk to other veterinarians, I tell them, like, we're the one profession that is telling people, oh no, don't feed your pet any fresh food. Only shop from the center of the supermarket aisles. Everything you feed your pet should come in a box or a bag. Don't buy that fresh stuff. You don't know what that is.
Well, and the analogy...
And if your human doctor said that to you, like, you'd think like, okay, this guy's a whack. I'm going to go shop the perimeter of the supermarket like I'm supposed to.
This is a very accurate analogy. It would be like going to a pediatrician when your child is of the age that they can start eating solid food, and the doctor looking at you and saying you should only feed them breakfast cereal every day for the rest of their life. That's nutrition. Even if it is organic, well-sourced breakfast cereal, you would never expect a human being to eat that way, let alone grow and thrive on that. It is the exact same concept with animals. And it's just, it's completely species inappropriate.
Right.
It's not how they're not gonna thrive. They're not.
And so that's why Melissa created this raw feeding guide that's in the Stand store that is like really lays it out so beautifully, and it's very easy to follow. It has a shopping list. It tells you what to feed and kind of just gently walks you into feeding a varied, raw, balanced diet without you having to do the ton of research or figure out where you're going to get stuff or hurt your brain in some other way that you really don't have time for. And so that's something that would be kind of easy to check out.
Yeah, so that's a resource that we've made, and if you're, that guide in particular shows you how to do raw with all whole foods, which is ideally where you want to end up. But if you're thinking about it and you're not quite ready to take that leap, we also have, we made just a holistic intro guide that I put at the end of that guide. It's our free guide when you go to our Stand store, that shows you at the very end, it shows you how to prep and get your dog ready to transition from kibble to a raw food. So you could easily use that guide, use the free guide, the sheet that's in there, go buy a commercially made pet food at whatever local, high-end pet food store, and you could start transitioning them. That's a lot of people get started that way. They don't necessarily go right to, I'm going to get this variety of animal proteins and I'm going to get these different whole foods. That's usually a lot too much to start with. If you're not ready to do something like that, you can easily go to a store and get a few different proteins that are in the freezer, and we give you a little, snapshot of how to transition, because your dog or your cat's gut does need to be somewhat prepared to receive that raw food, and it explains that. So there's a couple of resources there. One is free if you want to just know how to transition from kibble to raw. Otherwise, I have a full guide that I've made through a certification in canine nutrition, 10 years of experience. Dr. Levy kind of joined in on that with the information. It is very thorough. It's very well researched, and you can trust it. But
it's like not 100 pages either.
No, I kept it very short, and I wanted to make sure I didn't write a book. I wanted
Right.
it to be literally, it's less than 20 pages. It is very
Right.
easy to follow. I also give resources at the end if you want to continue to learn more, which I always encourage. So there's resources out there. We want people to get their animals on fresh food. We're trying to give as many different opportunities and ways that are easy for people to start applying that as possible. So we always have our online resources up and ready to go. They're always linked in the description down below. So please check those out if you're thinking about it and you're like, I don't know how to transition, but I want to. The free guide will show you how to do that. If you want to take it all head on and you want to do a full balanced raw diet, that's what the raw guide is for. It is very affordable. It is very short, and it walks you through. So there's those things. If you want any more help, you can also book a consultation with me, but I would always encourage you to start with the guide because it gives a lot of information, and that's way cheaper than spending 6 hours on the phone with me. So those are great resources as well. But I think, was there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, just if you have not watched Pet Fooled, it's available in a lot of different places. It's on YouTube. You can watch it for free. It's not super crazy long. It's like maybe an hour and 20, an hour and a half.
It's an hour, just over an hour.
Oh, is it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Just over an hour.
It's been a while since I watched it, but
I've watched it so many times.
But it's just a really good documentary that kind of walks you through where pet food actually comes from, and it's an eye-opener.
It'll change your life. So I think that's about all we have. You know, really, the recap is this. Kibble was made as a place for refuse to go. It was not made with the health of the dogs or cats in mind. They are facultative carnivores. They are meant to eat raw meat, whole foods. That's how they will thrive rather than merely surviving. You will also head a lot of things off at the pass, or probably if you have a dog already, it will clear up a lot of issues. It is process of elimination. Do that first. Hit the diet first. Know that there is plenty of information and science to back up what we're talking about, that this is the way that animals are supposed to eat. And unfortunately, there is a lot of reasons why the conventional world opposes it. But we're just really trying to bring forth this information and empower you as always. With some of
there's that really good book. It's called The Science Behind Canine Raw Feeding, or The Science Behind Raw Feeding by, what is her name? H.B. Turner or something like that.
Yes. Well, we'll link that one in the description.
Yeah, that's a really good one. It's a short book, but it really walks you through. This is not some, airy-fairy, our dogs should eat just like us kind of thing. It's our dogs should eat like dogs. They should eat the way that they were designed to.
I'll also link Billinghurst's book, Give Your Dog a Bone. He also did Raise Your Pup with Bones. So if you want something more specific to puppies, they're older books, but they're always just great perspective. Great perspective.
Yep.
So thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Crunchy Carnivore podcast. Until next time. Thank you so much for joining us. Our goal is always to encourage others to seek out the holistic approach by way of education and empowerment. You can check out our online resources at wellspringhaa.com. You can follow us on our YouTube channel, Wellspring Holistic Animal Academy, and you can also find us on Instagram at wellspring_HAA. We hope that this has been helpful and that you continue with us on your journey to holistic health for your pets. As always, we're here to be unapologetically all natural.